My daughter recently came back from college and said she had a surprise for us, but nothing could have prepared me for the surprise being a man twice her age who was trying to get her pregnant. Posted by you/practical by 3266. My 48F husband, 46M, and I have a 20-year-old daughter, Ellie, who is currently on vacation from college. About 5 months ago, Ellie told us that she had a new boyfriend, who I'll call Tom. This came rather out of the blue, as Ellie hadn't mentioned seeing anyone or that she was dating, but both my husband and I were supportive and happy for her. However, Ellie was strangely secretive about the whole situation. Usually, she's an open book, especially with me, and would always share details of her personal life. On this occasion, she wouldn't show any pictures, and we knew next to nothing about Tom, other than that they met at a party through a mutual friend. Ellie spent the past month of her vacation in her college town, and the plan was always for her to come back this weekend. Ellie asked if she could bring Tom with her for a few days of the trip, as they were getting serious, and she wanted him to meet us. Although we mentioned that we knew barely anything about him, Ellie expressed that it would be a surprise and that we'd love him. Given he's clearly an important part of our daughter's life, we agreed and said we'd look forward to spending the weekend together. Yesterday morning, we went to pick up Ellie and Tom from the airport to drive them to our place, and we were shocked. We knew instantly that Tom was much older than Ellie, and he certainly wasn't a college student. I was just in a state of surprise but didn't want to cause a scene, and told my husband to do the same. We drove home, but it was a frosty journey, which Ellie commented on. When we arrived, my husband point-blank asked Tom how old he was. Tom said he was 44. I was immediately disgusted. He's only 2 years younger than my husband and old enough to be Ellie's father. My husband continued to interrogate him, asking how they met and the whole background. Ellie explained that it was at a party and Tom was there because he's well known around the town, and they realized they had a lot in common and hit it off from there. I really didn't want to hear any more, and my husband told Tom to leave. Ellie shouted and said how unfair this was, that we hadn't even given Tom a chance, and that he made her happy. Tom could sense the tension, so he left, and Ellie followed behind him. I texted Ellie to tell her we'd love to see her and to come over to discuss the situation. She asked if Tom was welcome, and I said he wasn't. Therefore, after labeling me a judgmental jerk, she told me she wasn't coming and that they would be staying at a local hotel and catching up with friends. I feel terrible about the whole situation and don't want to lose my daughter over it. My husband isn't budging and says he'd have to be held back if he ever saw that man again. Am I the jerk for saying he isn't welcome, or have I done the right thing? Top/relevant comments. Commenter. I had a similar experience, and my foster dad was what I believe to be amazingly chill about me dating a guy in his mid-30s when I was 19. I spoke to him over a decade later, and he said he wanted to deck the guy, but knew if he pushed me, I'd dig my heels in and the relationship would last far longer. Instead, he asked me to check in so he knew where I was and when I'd be back, just to make sure I was safe. He did, however, do other things to gently highlight the inequality of the relationship. For example, he'd always tell me how nice I looked whenever I left the house. The boyfriend, on the other hand, would send me back to change if I wasn't wearing makeup or the right clothes. It didn't take too long for me to put 2 and 2 together and realize the boyfriend was a control freak who wanted a trophy girlfriend. Commenter 2. Not the jerk. He was at a college party because he's well known around town? That means he's well known for preying on younger women and probably also for buying alcohol for underage college students. Commenter 3. Play the long game here. Best story I've heard, the dad befriended the guy. They talked about stuff relevant to their age group, did dad age stuff together, talked about things like insurance, retirement, and house payments, went out to eat at boring grown-up places instead of sports bars, and just generally acted like middle-aged men. She realized she was basically dating her father, they had almost nothing in common, and broke up. Commenter 4. Former cop. Advocate. I would suggest you don't give her a reason to distance herself further from you and your husband, because Tom needs to cut off your support and brainwash her into thinking you're against her, which you're not. I encourage you not to exclude him. You can meet somewhere public so he's not in your home, but this way, you're not letting him keep your daughter away while you navigate this precarious situation. All the best. Update 1 day later. First off, I wanted to thank everyone for their comments and messages yesterday. I was overwhelmed by the responses and didn't expect my post to gain so much attention. I know opinions were quite split, but I appreciate everyone for being honest. Please accept my apologies for not responding to anyone, but there has been a lot on my mind, so I thought it would be best to provide an update for those interested. I was incredibly down throughout most of Sunday, so I spoke to my husband and said that I really wanted to see Ellie. However, I knew that wouldn't be possible without also seeing Tom, So I mentioned to my husband about meeting Ellie and Tom at a neutral location for brunch today. I asked my husband if he wanted to join, but he said he didn't feel in the right frame of mind at this stage, so we agreed that I would go alone. I was anxious throughout the drive, but when I met Ellie, those nerves subsided relatively quickly. I was generally just happy to see her and that she was well. I still felt a bit uncomfortable around Tom, but I thought this was the opportunity to find out more about him and his intentions, as it were. We sat down, and I tried to find out as much information about Tom as possible. When I asked him to elaborate on being known around a college town and being at the same party as Ellie, Tom said he used to go to the same college when he was Ellie's age, loved the place, and decided to never leave. Throughout his time, he still frequented the main bars and places that college students do, which meant he remained in the community in some form. I found it quite an unsettling response but remained polite. In terms of other details I learned, Tom has never been married, nor does he have any children. He works as a software engineer and enjoys cooking and meditation in his spare time. Something felt off about him, but maybe I already had my preconceptions. Ellie spoke more about what a good match they were and how much in common they had. When I asked her to elaborate, she spoke about how they both loved the same spots around town and campus, with apparently the same love of sushi, and she's never met someone so mature and understanding. Tom also said that Ellie was perfect for him and he was serious. I probed if he'd had many other relationships with younger women. Ellie didn't enjoy this question, but Tom said that he generally didn't do relationships, yet something about Ellie had drawn him in. Eventually, after about 2 hours, we ended the brunch. Ellie said how nice it had been and that she was so happy I had shown an interest in Tom before asking whether they could both come to dinner some evening. I told her that would be nice, but I would have to speak to her dad. Tom shook my hand, and that was that. My husband remains reluctant, but I feel it's the right thing to do if we want to maintain a relationship with Ellie. I didn't like Tom from first impressions, and this hasn't done much to convince me. Something is just off there, and some of his answers solidified my thoughts about him not being right for Ellie. I suppose I'll have to remain open-minded, but I appreciate any thoughts. Top/relevant comments. Commenter. The fact that his favorite spots are where college students hang out is such a red flag. He's stuck in a frat boy mentality and never grew up. I can only hope your daughter sees this sooner rather than later, and that the dude's a total creep. Commenter 2. Tom seems like the Leonardo DiCaprio type, only dating women and they hit 25. Like others have said, she'll age out eventually. Commenter 3. Except Leonardo DiCaprio has a draw, being rich and famous. This guy doesn't do relationships because he probably can't pull any. Now that he finally has his hooks in a co-ed naive enough to trust him, after about 26 years of trying to get a college girlfriend, he'll probably try to knock her up and put a ring on her as soon as possible. She'll always be a quarter century younger than him. Second update 1 week later. First off, apologies to everyone for not updating sooner and for my lack of replies. I read everyone's responses and messages, but it's been so overwhelming that I've struggled to know who to respond to. However, a lot has happened in the past week and enough people have asked for an update, so I thought I would provide one. After I came home from brunch, I spoke to my husband about the possibility of Tom and Ellie joining us for dinner one evening. My husband was completely against it, but I told him that if we still wanted to exercise some degree of control over the situation before we pushed Ellie away entirely, this was something we had to agree to. It took a lot of convincing, but my husband agreed, and we invited Tom and Ellie to come round this past Saturday. Before then, I ended up talking to my oldest daughter and Ellie's sister, Holly, 23F, about the situation. Holly was shocked, and Ellie had told her nothing. Holly decided to do some social media digging but struggled because Tom didn't have much of an online presence. She said she was coming to dinner on Saturday. Although I was reluctant because it seemed like it would spiral, I eventually said yes. So, we get to the dinner on Saturday, and Holly just continually grilled Tom. It was far, far worse than I did. She asked him if younger girls were his type, why someone his age is still hanging around at college parties, and made other small remarks. Ellie told her multiple times to leave her alone, and I tried to act as a mediator. My husband was just silently seething, and I could tell how uncomfortable he felt in Tom's presence. Eventually, Tom and Ellie said they had some big news to share. Ellie announced that she and Tom were planning to move in together for the upcoming college year. I almost spat my drink out. Ellie had planned to live with other friends, and when I questioned this, Tom answered that he realized that he probably won't have another long-term relationship. Ellie makes him so happy, and he doesn't want to waste any time with who I want to be my wife and the future mother of my children. At this point, my husband lost it and told Tom to get out of his house. Tom stood up and seemed affronted, and Ellie started crying. I couldn't remember the last time my husband had shouted like that, and I think it surprised Ellie. Holly said it was deserved and that she needed to get away from the pedo freak. It all ended with Ellie leaving in tears with Tom, my husband going upstairs, and I was just inconsolable. I've reached out to Ellie since, but she hasn't responded. I don't want her to move in with Tom, and it seems like he's trying to derail her whole life. She's 20 and does not need to be married and have kids, especially with someone his age. She's never had a relationship before, and she appears infatuated to the extent that she's not going to listen. My husband has told me that if Ellie marries Tom, that's it, he wouldn't want a relationship with her going forward. I can't agree with that and will always love Ellie, but it doesn't mean that the whole situation hasn't made me incredibly sad. Top/relevant comments. Commenter. He 100% knows what he's doing. He's driving a wedge between you and Ellie, he's moving her in with him instead of letting her move in with her friends. He's isolating her so she relies on him. I'm sure Ellie's friends clocked creepy Tom the second they met him, and he knew it, so they obviously couldn't stay. Just drive into her head that she can always come to you, no matter what she needs. You may not support her relationship, but you will always support her, because she will need it. Unfortunately, there's no telling how long it'll take her to realize it. She could wake up tomorrow and realize how crappy her situation is, or it could take her 10 years. Regardless, be there for her, with or without your husband's support. Up to a deleted commenter. In retrospect, I agree that it was a mistake to let Holly come. She was relentless and made the point that this involved the family and she shouldn't be excluded. I think she's exhibiting a lot of judgment right now towards Ellie. Third update 1 year later. About a year ago, I posted on here about my then 20-year-old daughter, Ellie, who had started dating a 44, now 45-year-old man named Tom. So much has happened since then that has been so overwhelming that it caused me to completely forget about this. However, I stumbled upon this Reddit account earlier today, and due to the number of messages I received, I feel compelled to share an update. For those who don't want to read the whole post, the long and the short of it is, Ellie is engaged and pregnant. The engagement happened around January, after only about a year of dating, and the pregnancy was announced in March. Ellie is keeping the baby and is due later this year. I'm still heartbroken and struggling to come to terms with the whole affair. Ellie was so bright, cheery, and had an active social life. Now she lives with Tom in her college town, despite having dropped out of college herself due to the pregnancy, with barely any friends, as most of them have distanced themselves from her because of Tom. My husband is also low contact with Ellie and wants nothing to do with Tom, while my daughter Holly also feels the same way and wants nothing to do with Ellie or her baby for as long as she remains with the predator. I still keep in contact with Ellie as much as I can, not only because I love her, but also because I know that if things crumble, she'll have no one to turn to. She's ostracized herself, which makes me incredibly sad, and I never thought things would turn out this way. There was a glimmer of hope around March, when Ellie called me on the phone in tears after discovering that Tom had cheated on her, unsurprisingly, with another college student, and an even younger one than Ellie. Although I did try to talk some sense into her and figured this would be a wake-up call, she decided to stay with him after a combination of love bombing and finding out she was pregnant. The wedding has been set for next summer so the baby can be focused on now. My husband and other daughter have already decided they won't go, and many others on my side of the family are uncomfortable with the idea. I'm trying to stay strong and hope I will love my grandchild, but this isn't something that will ever get easier. I appreciate everyone's support and advice. It really meant more than you know. Top/relevant comments. Commenter. Poor girl will be 25 and a single mom to 2 to 3 kids, while her ex-husband starts dating another girl in her early 20s who's child-free. Then she'll be moving back in with her parents with multiple kids, no decent employment, and no education. By 30, she'll be getting her life together while her peers have surpassed her in goals and life milestones. She'll see classmates getting married, buying houses, going on trips abroad, building decent careers, and having babies, without missing out on the fun of their early 20s. Her older sister will be living the life she wants, and she will be jealous eventually. Commenter 2. It'll be the consequences of her own actions. She has no one to blame but herself, unfortunately. Commenter 3. At 20/21, he's 1000% love bombing and cutting her off from friends and family. He just doesn't have to do any work for it because everyone in her life has left her behind, because Tom makes them uncomfortable just by being there, which, understandable, he's 24 years older than her. I don't think she's ostracized herself on her own. I think he's convinced her that real friends and real family would be supportive of their relationship, and everyone else is toxic. It's honestly heartbreaking. Commenter 4. You can't control your daughter or her choices. You can only decide whether you want to be part of your grandchild's life. If so, you should make it easy for your daughter and grandchild to be with you.